So today I'm going to be showing you 6 property hacks so you can find some cracking deals, some of those gold deals out there using these simple tools. So point 1 is places to find deals online where you have access direct to the vendor. So this is platforms such as Facebook Marketplace and Gumtree. So yes, people do really sell their houses on Gumtree and Facebook Marketplace, believe me. And I think you could agree that if someone is potentially selling their property on Facebook, that they're either a little desperate or maybe trying to cut costs by not using an agent, or maybe a little naive. So from an investment point of view, there's some potential advantages already there. But I think one of the best reasons here is actually that you get direct access to the person selling the property. And this is a kind of unique position to be in. You're not having to deal with an agent. You're not having to deal with that middleman whose job it is essentially to generate as much income and get the purchase price to as high as it can be in order to maximize their commission. You're cutting that out completely. So you're able to speak to the vendor directly, build rapport, and really find out why are they selling? What are their problems? Because as I've said before, property and finding the best deals is all about problem solving. And if you can find out what their problem is and their reason for selling, then you're in a advantageous position, because those kind of pieces of information aren't often really given by the agent. Agents are normally quite coy on those kind of questions and answers. So having access directly to the vendor puts you in a powerful position. And all this power means that you are in a better place to negotiate on the price, because ultimately the effectiveness of the deal comes around to the price. So being direct to the vendor, having no middleman there, knowing their problems, this means that you're in a much better place to negotiate on price and potentially find a price that works for everyone. And just a note on the process by which to go about these negotiations and conversations with the vendor. Firstly, I suppose like any relationship, you should look to build rapport. You shouldn't go straight in and start negotiating like an auction. You want to build a personal relationship with that vendor, because that will mean when you actually come to do the negotiation, the more difficult part, everyone will be a lot more relaxed and there will be some trust there, and it will just make the process a lot easier for everyone and also increase your chances of finding a win-win situation. But also, if you have got a more personal relationship with that vendor and they start to trust you and like you, they are more than likely to start giving you some honest answers and some clearer answers as to why they're selling the property. What are their actual problems that you need to know in order so you can solve them. You want to ideally meet them face to face, because that will also increase rapport as well. So when you're having the initial conversation, which was likely to be on the phone, your objective of that call is to essentially build rapport and then book in a face-to-face meeting. So continue to build rapport until you're in a position where you have all the facts and all the information, and then you can start a negotiation process around price and finding that win-win situation for everyone. Okay, so next is small agents, and this is around independent estate agents. Now, these independent estate agents might not necessarily be on the big online selling platforms such as Rightmove or Zoopla. This is because these agents might not actually have the marketing budget to pay the fairly hefty fees from these online platforms, because these platforms actually do get criticized for the amount they charge, and there is a bit of a kind of revolt happening in the property industry at the moment in terms of not wanting to, or agents not wanting to go onto Rightmove, for example. The reason you're looking to target these smaller agents is that they're going to have less exposure, they're going to have potentially less interest in the properties that they're trying to sell, which means that if you're coming along with an interest in any of the potentially good deals that they've got, potentially the houses that they're struggling to sell, that again puts you in an advantageous position. So the way to find out these agents is to simply Google a list of agents in your area and do a comparison and look at those that aren't on Rightmove by looking at a list of agents on Rightmove, which you should be able to find because it provides a list of agents that advertise on Rightmove on the website. So do that comparison, and then you will come up with a short list of agents in your area or in your area that you're targeting that you'll be able to then have conversations with. And then it is about building relationships with those agents, going in regularly, having phone calls, going on viewings, building that rapport, maybe going for a coffee with them, taking it out to lunch. Again, similar to direct to vendor, building that relationship on a personal level so they're able to then start trusting you, start liking you, and then thinking of you first when they do actually have some potentially good deals. Because the position you want to be in is that whenever they are struggling to sell a property, whenever there is a reduction, whenever they've got a desperate seller, that you are first in their minds and that they come to you first, potentially before they've even put it on the market. That is the dream scenario, and that is what you want to put your time into doing when you're trying to build relationships with those smaller agents. Okay, point 3 is empty homes list. So this is a council initiative to try and reduce the amount of empty homes that are in this country. Now, obviously, this is kind of a big political issue, which I'm not going to discuss the ins and outs of that today, but there are quite a few councils who have particular initiatives around trying to reduce empty homes in their areas. So, for example, they may have an empty homes officer, so someone who is actually responsible for trying to increase the utilization of these empty homes. For example, Newcastle and Sunderland both have empty homes officers, and they are a bit more forward thinking councils, and obviously maybe a little bit more budget as well to have that officer. They also have grants available to incentivize investors to carry out works on the property, or encourage the landlord itself who owns the property to carry out works. So grants of up to £10,000 are available for properties that have been empty for over a year, and it's a staggered kind of system based on how long they've been empty for. They also have a empty homes list. This is something that some of the northeast councils have, but there will be other councils that probably follow suit. So this is an email list where the council actually email out empty homes that are still on the market and available to sell, but they're also indicating where grants are available for them, so you can then factor that into your deal numbers. So it's a really great kind of shortcut and window of opportunity that you're getting access to on these lists, and kind of incentivized to support you and help you actually to buy those properties because it meets their targets. These lists and council officers are completely free and very much open to conversations with investors, so it's creating a win-win for everyone. So it's a really great resource. So the fourth resource is actually letting agents. Now, this is actually around letting agents who don't actually have a selling arm. There are letting agents out there who are just purely to do with rentals and lettings and don't actually have a sort of estate agency attached, buying and selling property. Now, the advantage of these agents is that they have access to potentially hundreds of landlords, and often, I suppose statistically, some of these landlords will be looking to sell, either because they're looking to downsize their portfolio, because they're looking to retire, because they're looking to raise some capital, and it will be the letting agent who potentially knows that first, because the landlord might start having conversations with the letting agent about, having to give up the rental property, potentially having to move out the tenant, or even ask the letting agent, could they make the sale themselves? Could they sell the property for them? But obviously, because these letting agents don't actually have an avenue for which to sell the properties, this means that if you are a kind of savvy investor and you've built a relationship with a letting agent who is unable to sell the property, again, you could be front and center in their mind when there is these potential leads that come up from their landlord set. So similar steps to what I mentioned before. This is about building rapport with those letting agents, doing some online research to find out which letting agents don't actually have an estate agency attached to them, and then targeting those and building those relationships over a longer period of time to then potentially be first in line for when those deals come off. Again, because you've not got an estate agent involved, you've just got a letting agent, but they're not necessarily going to be involved in a negotiation. You're direct to that vendor, so you're having direct to vendor conversations, which then puts you in a great position. Now, in terms of incentivizing the letting agents, because there has to be something in it for them in order to put you in front of the queue, there's kind of two potential incentives that you could offer. One, you could actually offer them a fee for selling the property, an essentially introduction fee. So similar to an estate agent might get for selling the property, but you could pay them an introduction fee, of a few £100 or whatever you want to, whatever you're able to offer them. You could also offer them the extra incentive that once the property is complete and in your name, they could again get the letting from them, so they're not losing the lettings income, they're just keeping the property and they continue to manage it on your behalf, so they're not losing out there. By providing these incentives to the letting agent, you're very much creating a win-win. You're giving them what they want, which is additional income, keeping the lettings income from that property. You're enabling them to help their landlord or help their client to sell a property, and obviously you're getting a deal off market and direct to vendor as well. If you're enjoying this video today, please do subscribe to our channel. I'd really appreciate the support, and it does help us to grow, so thanks very much. So number 5 is using online tools. So this is using sites such as Property Data data to really do some of the legwork for you and to also provide you with information that isn't necessarily readily available. So for example, property data has sold price information that isn't available elsewhere on the internet. So for example, on Rightmove or on Zoopla. So this means that you can see the sold prices within the last 6 months on a street or within an area that other people don't have access to. And this means that you can potentially be ahead of the game and you could be spotting deals that other people won't necessarily be able to see. So for example, if you're looking at a property on a street and it's say for £90,000 and property data actually says that there was one sold on the same street like 2 months ago for say £130,000. So you know that there's potentially £30,000 margin in that deal and that property is £30,000 below market value. But the only other data available online that's not through property data only shows that the last sold on the street was say £105,000. So people think there's only £5,000 margin. It's £5,000 below market value. So therefore they might not see that as a deal. So they're not seeing what you're seeing, and that means you're spotting the opportunities and the deals because you found a property which is £30,000 below market value, and that puts you ahead of the game. And again, property data has information on there to again take the hassle out of it, and they can show you a list of properties that have been reduced in the last 4 weeks. They can show you a list of properties that are in auction or repossession. So it just helps you to refine your search better than you can on Rightmove, for example. It's a lot more investment led. And again, you know, knowledge is power, and all of this information and knowledge puts you in a greater position of power and the ability to spot opportunities where other people might not have that similar data to find those deals. So number 6 is actually about outsourcing and letting other people do the work for you. Now this is like using a company such as ourselves, a property investment and sourcing company, who is able to carry out all of the work for you. And the advantages of using such a company: 1, knowledge of the local area, knowledge of the locations that work, knowledge of the kind of numbers, the comparables, the rental demand, because as we know, it's so important in property that you have all of that knowledge, and all of that knowledge takes time to find out, time to research, and it is very easy to get burnt if you make a mistake in any of those areas. So if you're buying a property, for example, in the wrong area which doesn't have a rental demand, then you're going to have problems renting that out. So you're tapping into someone's knowledge by using a company like this and really shortcutting the amount of time that it would take you to get up to speed and learn all of that information. The second advantage is actually around relationships, because as I've talked about the importance of building relationships with agents for deals, for example, that takes time, and that's not actually particularly easy because there's lots of people trying to do it, and it's not something that will happen overnight. But it's not just agents that are important to build relationships with, it's all of the people involved within a property transaction that you need to have a relationship with. So a broker, a solicitor, a build team, for example, a good letting agent to manage the property on the end, and all of those take time. And again, it's very easy to get burnt if you enter into a relationship with a service provider or a company that isn't actually very good at what they do, and you could easily lose a lot of money or cost you a lot of stress if you pick the wrong company to partner with. So by working with a company that already has all those relationships in place, you are again shortcutting all of that time to build those relationships, but you're also reducing your risk because they've already got the relationships. They are working with vetted and trusted people that you don't necessarily have access to, and you don't necessarily know who the best people are. And then the third advantage here is actually giving you access to deals that you might not have access to, or you might not know are deals. So for example, you might not have the knowledge that a area is being regenerated, that there is some investment plan that's not necessarily made it to the public domain yet, and that means that area is going to be hot for investment and capital growth in the future. But these companies that are working in these areas might be ahead of the game and have inside knowledge into those areas where there is going to be a lot of investment, but you wouldn't necessarily know that. And that means that they are providing you properties which have really long-term growth opportunities and value, and are actually kind of ahead of the game. So you're getting in there early, and as we know, getting in there early to a market is where the best deals are found, because it is before the upward curve comes in terms of demand and growth, and it's better to buy at the bottom. And it is these kind of companies companies that have access to that knowledge and those relationships to give them kind of inside knowledge to spot the opportunities and provide the kind of deals that you wouldn't have access or knowledge to know that they exist. And yeah, all of these things that I've mentioned, you could do yourselves. You could build knowledge, you could build relationships, you could have access to deals that you don't necessarily know about yet, but all of that takes time. So working with an investment company enables you to shortcut a lot of that. And if you haven't got time as well, if you're really busy full-time employed person, for example, you can shortcut towards your goals by, working with a company that does all of these services themselves. So that's my 6 property hacks. And as you can see, there are many ways to find great deals out there, all of which do take time. And as you can see, there's a running thread and theme throughout everything that I've said today, which is around relationships. Those relationships need care and attention and time given to them, and they're not something that you can build overnight, but they are possible to do. And don't forget that property is essentially a people's game, and by building those relationships with people, that will put you in a position of power, in a position of advantage to get some really cracking deals. Thanks so much for watching to the end of this video. Really hope you enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. Could you do me a favor, which is to like the video, put any comments below, and also if you subscribe to our channel as well, trying to get more content out to people like yourself. I'd really appreciate your support. Thanks in advance.